Hello and welcome to our look ahead to what the papers will be bringing us tomorrow. With me, the broadcaster LYNN FAULDS-WOOD and James Lyons, Deputy Political Editor of the Daily Mirror. Thank you very much indeed. Let's just kick off with a look at some of the front pages that we already have in, and starting with the Financial Times, which claims that the Serious Fraud Office could investigate allegations that RBS forced some firms to go bust. The paper also highlights a special article deeper inside the paper written by David Cameron, announcing a crackdown on EU migration. New rules to be announced for immigrants coming to the UK from Bulgaria and Romania also feature on the front of the Telegraph. Its main picture, though, is of Nigella Lawson, accused in court of being a regular user of cocaine. News that a police officer has been charged over the so-called Plebgate affair in Downing Street is the story dominating the front of The Guardian. While in the Daily Express, Nigella Lawson makes the headline with those accusations of her drug use in court today. Nigella off her head on cocaine, the paper splash. So let's begin. Lynn, well, the Telegraph, as you were saying to me just before we came on air, seems to have all the stories on the front page. Where do you want to start?
It's a smorgasbord of stories. Well, I'm going to talk in a Scottish accent with a nod towards the white paper that's been released today. Well, I could tell you all sorts of stories. Do you want to start on EU immigration, the Cameron port? Do you want to start on the NHS wanting this army of winter friends?
Right, or in fact, I'm being told that the Telegraph we were talking about beforehand, but let's just kick off with the FT, which is,
this is Cameron's article.
The Cameron article, which in fact all the papers have got, haven't they?
Yeah, and now this shows a hardening of our attitudes towards immigration, because Nick Clegg has even signed off this article saying it's sensible. And basically what Cameron wants, among other things, he wants a crackdown on immigration, he wants vagrants to be deported. He wants to restrict benefits to immigrants, and he wants to stop vast migrations.
But James, this has been trailed long in advance, hasn't it? In terms of what they wanted to do with these A2 countries, these accession countries.
Well, some of these measures we've seen today are that it's the first time we've sort of seen them there in black and white. And one of the key points here is that they're imposing what would effectively be a 6-month limit on EU immigrants claiming benefits. After that, if you couldn't prove that you were likely to get a job, you wouldn't get benefits anymore. As Lynn said, they're also looking at deporting vagrants and beggars. And further down the road, what David Cameron's talking about in the FT article is looking at imposing some longer-term rules to restrict what's known as the free movement of labour across the EU.
This would break EU law, wouldn't it?
I think certainly as it stands, certainly the GDP rules would, and free movement of labour, the opportunity that you and I have to go and ply our trade in Spain or in Italy or whatever else, and in return people come over here. That is one of the bedrocks of the EU as it stands, and I think, frankly, David Cameron's got about as much chance of getting that as I have becoming First Minister of Scotland. This is definitely another ratcheting up of the government's response to the lifting on the curbs on immigrants from Bulgaria and Romania. We're going to see at the end of the year. They're desperate not to be seen as a soft touch. Personally, I don't think this is going to make a great deal of difference. As the Bulgarian ambassador said this week, there are an awful lot of them already here because there are certain limited jobs they can do. And so I can't really see this.
I had a very lovely Romanian taxi driver bring me in tonight, actually. He'd been here for years, paying his taxes. He's just making a bit of money, then he's going to go back and marry his childhood sweetheart. And I thought, that's exactly the sort of guy we want in this country.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on now to.
Actually, Alex Salmon, by the way, he's got. Later on, we'll have a look at one of the Scottish papers, I hope, and he's saying we want more immigrants up here, and we're going to welcome them. So that's part of this plan. Right.
Okay. Let's move on to the Telegraph. James, the NHS wants Samaritan Army to help the elderly. The whole list of celebrities joining this winter effort. What do you make of this?
Winter friends.
Yes, winter friends. Joanna Lumley there is fronting and she's talking about how the crisp winter days are marvellous fun for the young and fit, but a problem for older people. Well, I find this an absolutely extraordinary story. We were told that the health service was safe in David Cameron's hands, and here we have them desperately appealing for 100,000 1,000 volunteers to try and see it through the winter. I mean, it's an extraordinary state of affairs when we have to rely on this. I mean, this is the big society in action. Run down public services and expect someone else to come in and pick it up.
But in terms of volunteering and just trying to create this sort of sense of community, I mean, this is something which, you know, would be of benefit, would it not?
Well, as an add-on, it would. I mean, but the problem with this is this is being brought in as a crisis
But there's
measure.
no, I mean, the way the Telegraph are writing it, there doesn't seem to be any sort of political context in this at all. The fact that, you know, winter deaths increased by, what, 30% or something last year.
The 500,000 older people get taken to hospital every year with things like pneumonia and malnutrition, and over half the 75-year-olds live alone. Now, what they're wanting, when you read the small print on it, what they want is to go out and sweep their paths in case it's icy and to run them to the doctor. A lot of people do that already, and it ain't going to work if that's your solution to stopping 500,000 old people ending up in your hospitals every winter. You've got to have a better plan than this.
Alongside that story, a picture of Nigella, coming to that story in some of the other papers. But just below that, the slave is daughter of Enigma Code hero. These three women allegedly held as slaves for 30 years. I mean, every day, James, there's a new twist, isn't there?
Indeed, yeah. Alongside that, alongside the details that are reported here, also we've seen today the first pictures of Comrade Bala, as he's known. You know, the first footage of him has come out. It's just extraordinary what's clear. You know, what appears to have been going on in South London, just around the corner from my old house, actually.
and one of them is supposed to be the daughter of an Enigma Code hero, for the men who broke the code during the war.
Yeah, and the Telegraph, I think, today, so not in other words, tomorrow's papers, had a picture, didn't they, of one of the women from Malaysia as well. But it's going to be a difficult, complicated, complex case, isn't it? Just bearing in mind the alleged brainwashing aspect of this.
Who knows where that story's going to go? It's incredible.
The other stories about slavery. Right, on to the Express. And it's not about exercise, it's not about Diana, it's not about vegetables being good for your health. It's Nigella. Well, I suppose
it's a news event in itself, isn't it? Rather different from the usual run.
There's a food link somewhere there.
It's come out because there's a court case happening very near to where I live, in Isleworth, with two Italian sisters who are reputed to have taken £300,000 they weren't entitled to on Nigella and her husband's credit cards for holidays and so on, and first-class air travel and clothes. And the judge at first ruled that they couldn't bring into court what appears to be a drug habit of Nigella's, and the Express has it going on over the last 10 years, I think. And then 100 pages of more evidence was presented, and the judge said, oh, all right, then you can. So now we're going to see Nigella, or Higella, as apparently her husband had called her on occasion, in the witness box talking about her liking for various drugs.
Well, she'll be in the witness box, so she denies all these...
She says totally scurrilous.
Yes, but James, I mean, this is going to be, well, it's not just a sort of tabloid sensation. I mean, you can see from just the coverage today.
It's going to be on the front of all of the newspapers. And I'd suggest it's going to be on all of the newspapers for quite a few days to come.
Mirror.
It certainly will be on the front of the Mirror, yeah.
And internationally as well.
There are details here, they're not on the front of the Express, but I've seen them in some of the other coverage here about some of the details about the impact that this has had on her family, and there's an awful lot more to be dredged through here. And as Lynn was saying, it all comes down to the fact that these two accused, who were basically domestics, I think Nigella called them her kitchen confidants, have been allowed to bring in the question of her bad character. So extraordinary claims, and more to come.
Yeah, and what a development after their quickie divorce in the summer. On to the Guardian. Claim of police lies reignites plebgate row. It's been interesting hearing some of the friends and colleagues, isn't it, of Andrew Mitchell today, and the anger expressed.
Well, and Andrew Mitchell himself, to be fair. But no one was more furious than Andrew Mitchell today, I can promise you.
Yeah, but the anger felt about this, that, you know, and not enough evidence to suggest there'd been any conspiracy.
Well, this was the first time as well. This is the first time we've seen Andrew Mitchell stand up and accuse the policeman who made the original accusation of lying.
Toby Rowland.
Of making it up quite, and it's interesting because the policing watchdog actually said that he didn't want this to go any further. He just wanted a quiet apology, and here he is, thrust centre stage. Andrew Mitchell's effectively said, I'll see you in court, because he's launched a libel action over this. And tonight, Rowland has said, well, you know, I stand by everything I wrote in my police notebook. So it's gearing up to be a hell of a showdown. But I mean, you know, I think, you know, the decision of the CPS today, what's made Andrew Mitchell so furious is the fact that it really has put him on a sticky wicket when in terms of a career comeback. You know, he wanted absolute vindication, but here we have this guy. You know, one other policeman has been charged, others are facing disciplinary action, but not the guy who's central to the case.
No, and Lynn, just in terms of the cost of the whole police investigation into this as well.
Well, what could you have spent that money on instead that might be more valuable? And what's happened today, see, well, first of all, you've got a former Minister of the Crown saying he's been fitted up. It's astonishing. And then you've got the Crown Prosecution Service saying, basically, there's no proof on either side that they can see. So if we're spending more money on this, this is ludicrous.
But the DPP also pointing out that CCTV footage, you know, that there was some criticism of the media outlets, I think, as well, because there was more CCTV which hadn't actually gone into the public domain, which suggested that either, you know, it didn't completely rule out that those comments weren't made or could have been made.
And we saw we had the extraordinary sight of David Davis today playing Chief Inspector Davis, you know, and presenting the evidence from his mate Andrew Mitchell's point of view, and sort of walking us through the CCTV footage. But, you know, the CPS say they've seen all this stuff and they've made their decision.
Yeah. Okay. Right, now, the Herald. Inside Independence White Paper, 8-page special report. We do not seek independence as an end in itself, but as a means to change Scotland for the better. Salmon Sturgeon unveil SNP vision for the future. So, reading through this, the Herald, talk us through their position on this, James.
Well, it's not for me to speak for the Herald's position. They seem to be taking a quite even-handed approach here. And in fact, I used to work with Magnus Gardam, who's written this piece. So I'm sure it's a fine piece of journalism. But I mean, we've had this extraordinarily large document today, 670 pages long, which was supposed to answer all the questions that anyone would have about independence. And all that it's done is trigger some more. You know, they've got an economic policy which is based on keeping the pound, which all the parties in Westminster have said that they wouldn't go along with. They've got a foreign policy which is based on staying in the EU. Well, there are no guarantees of that. And they've got a defence and security policy based on staying in NATO, and there's no guarantee of that either.
It's a wish list. It's the land of milk and honey that he's selling here. I'm moving back to Scotland.
Well, I know, but I mean, it's a wish list, which rather
well,
appeals to
exactly. You can promise anything. We'll keep the Queen, we'll keep the pound, we'll stay in Europe, we'll stay in NATO.
It's only a few years since Mr. Salmond, if I pronounced that correctly.
Yes,
Lynn was correcting my pronunciation before we came on.
Scots always pronounce every letter.
He was saying that actually what they should be doing is looking at dropping sterling, because it was sinking like a stone, and getting on board with the euro. Well, that went well, didn't it?
Yeah. No, I think it's very easy to make long promises, and that's what he's doing. He's got 10 months.
Well, 38% apparently of Scots support independence at the moment, but a lot of the 5 million population are undecided. So 10 months to.
Astonishingly, I rang my friends from when we were at Glasgow University, and they're voting for independence, and I was surprised. And they say, look, Norway, Sweden, we're Scandinavian now. So,
well, that's another thing that the First Minister used to talk about, was the arc of prosperity that reached from Iceland down to Ireland, and you don't hear
that's
and you won't hear half of this after.
OK, all right, look, we'll have more time to discuss this later on. Thank you very much, though. That is it for the papers this hour. Lynn and James back with me at 11:30 for another look at the stories making the front pages. Stay with us here on BBC News, because at 11, First Minister Alex Salmond sets out his vision of an independent Scotland, but opponents say it is a work of fiction. We'll be looking at that in much more detail. Before that, then, let's catch up with all the sports news in Sports Day.